Again, everybody, it's Mr. Han, and this is the second part of our debugging techniques video series. And one of the things I want to touch on this week is how to work with objects and classes and debug with them. So this is something we kind of danced around quite a bit throughout the course, and we haven't really nailed down exactly what an object in a class is. We've been creating classes. Every time we create a new program, we're creating a new class and giving it a name, but we really haven't touched on the relationship between classes and objects and how they work. So whenever you create a class, what you're doing is you're creating a blueprint for an object. So in the real world, there's objects and they have characteristics. They have characteristics that are quantifiable, like size and height and color. And then oftentimes objects like human beings or dogs, as the case may be in our example here, they do things. They eat things, they bark, they they walk, they talk, they do things. So objects have to be able to do things, and they also have to be able to store variables about themselves. And this is where this whole idea, this whole paradigm of object-oriented programming comes from. It's the idea that your programming should be reflective of what happens in the real world. Take real world objects and turn them into little bits of computer programs. So let's say I was doing this for a dog. This is a pretty basic example, but I might store some variables about a dog. I might store its fur color as a string. I might store its integer as, its fur length as an integer. Whether or not it sheds fur might be a Boolean. And because it's a dog, because it does stuff, it's also going to have some methods. So a dog can bark. That's a method for the dog. Dogs eat. In order to eat, you have to pass it food. So you'd have to pass it food type. Okay. Dogs wag their tail. All of these things would be methods for the dog. These are things that the dog can do. They're actions. That's why methods are always named with like an action word. Okay, and then in order to create a new dog in my program, what I'd have to do is make a call to the class. So I would call the dog class, okay, and I would give the dog a name. Okay, so this would be my dog object, Buster the dog. Okay, we've seen this before. We can actually see it right here. So right here, I'm using the scanner class, and I'm creating a new scanner object called input. Okay, and then over here. Over here is my constructor for that class. So new scanner. Okay, in this case, it takes some arguments. Okay, we can talk more about that later. Sometimes with the constructor you have arguments, sometimes you don't. For our dog example, we don't have any arguments for the constructor. So we just say that we're creating a new dog. This is the constructor for it. It doesn't need any information to get started. So we've used this before. We've actually used this quite a few times in our programming. So scanner would be one example. And in the example I'm going to show you guys today, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a random student number. Okay, so let's come down into the code. So I got the scanner object. Okay, it's going to be called input, and then what it's going to do is it's going to ask the user for their name, and it's going to use that input scanner object to get the next line. Now, one of the things with objects is we don't always know all their methods. One thing you can do is you can start typing it out, and then you can use the dot. Okay, so we string together our methods for objects by calling that object and then using the dot to string it together with its method. In this case, it brings up a list of methods, possible methods that we could use. Okay, in the case where we're trying to get the name, what we want is the whole next line. Okay, so I'm going to click that, and there it is. It's inside my code. Okay, then I'm going to prompt the user for their enrollment number, and this time I'm going to use the integer class. So we talked about this last day. The integer class is different than the integer variable. The integer variable is just a storage location. The integer class, much like our dog class, can store information, but it also has a number of methods associated with it that allow us to manipulate that information. So the integer class is a little more powerful. So now I'm going to use this integer number to store it, and I'm going to use the input method next integer to get that next number. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off the code by taking this, and putting it here, and I'm just going to run what we have right now. So enter your name, Mr. Han, enter your enrollment number, 501, and we got a successful build. Okay, now the next thing I want my code to do is I want to take that enrollment number, I want to convert it to a string, because the next thing I want to be able to do is respond back to the user with what the information that I have. Okay, so I'm going to now take that information, and I'm going to use this toString method because it was an integer type to convert it to a string. Okay, so anytime you have a number and you want to convert it to a string, an integer object is the way to go. Okay, so I'm going to convert it to a string. I'm going to use this concat function. Again, how did I know I could use concat? Well, I've got name and I know I want to connect these things together. What I can do is start typing. I can put the dot and it'll offer up some methods that I could use. In this case, concatenate came up first, and what it does is it tells me exactly what I need to do in order to use this function, and it tells me exactly how it works, and it shows me some examples and how they work. So I'm going to use that concatenate function, and now I can concatenate those two strings together. So I'm going to stick them together the way they look. I'm also going to create a greeting called hello. I'm going to concatenate that on as well, and then I'm going to output it to the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut the code off from here down, and I'm going to run it. Enter your name, Mr. Han. Enter your enrollment number, 501, and it says, hello, your enrollment number is 501. Great. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with creating a random student number. So I'm going to shut this off again, and I'm going to come down, okay? And the random number that I want to create, I'm going to use this random class, okay? And I create a new object called random, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to seed it. Okay, it's going to return an integer. How did I know that? Well, I can check the Java docs for this thing. So what I can do is I can highlight the class. Okay, and the other way I can figure out what these classes do is I can come up here and go show Java doc. It's going to open up a web page, and in here it gives the name of the class. Okay, it talks about how to initialize it. Okay, and if you come down here, it shows you the constructors. So there's two types of constructors here for random. You can leave it blank, and it'll just create a random number. It actually seeds it with the time from the clock. Okay, or I can give it any number, any digit that I want to put in here in the long variable type, up to the long variable type, and that will be used to seed this random number. Okay, there's a variety of methods that are attached to it. Okay, the one that we're interested in is this next int. Okay, so it returns this sort of pseudo random number, sort of evenly distributed. Okay, so I don't need to look at the Java doc anymore. I know what I want it to do. I'm going to use next int, and what that'll do is create a random number that I can use. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, instead of it being the enrollment number here, it's going to be your student number is, and it's going to return the student number, okay, and output again. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now we can run all of our code. Enter your name, Mr. Han. Your enrollment number is 501. So hello, Mr. Han, your enrollment number is 501. Your student number is now this crazy long random number that's been created. Now what you can do if you want to sort of keep the number manageable, or maybe you want it to be relatively small, what you can do is you can put a limit on it. So I could say, like, I just want numbers between 1 and 85. So now if I run it again, what's your name, Mr. Han? Okay, enter your enrollment number, 501. Okay, now it's giving me a number that's between 1 and 85. And if I kept running, we would see just a variety of numbers actually between 0 and 84. So one of the things, if I want to create like a minimum threshold on here, like let's say I don't want 0, okay, what I can do is I can do +1 there to make sure I never get a number of 0. So that creates like a floor for that random number. And so again, I'll get numbers 0 between 0 and 84, and then it'll add on 1 to them. Okay, so this top number doesn't get included. It's exclusive of the seed. So these are a couple of ways that we can go about debugging our code when we're working with objects and classes, and then we have a better understanding of objects and classes. Just to review, so class is like a template, and we've been creating them all along. We've been creating classes to do things all year long, and now what we're doing is taking those classes and starting to implement them and use them with objects. So anytime we use the scanner type class or the string class or the integer class, what we're doing is we're creating objects of those classes and then using their methods. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact.